Called Running the Numbers. But what I want to do instead is just jump right into the environmental tragedy that's happening on Midway Island that I've been photographing and now I'm making a film about. How many people are aware that there's an island in the middle of the Pacific Ocean called Midway that is covered with the bodies of tens of thousands of dead baby birds who are all filled with plastic? About half, something like that. Well, it's this stunning thing that I learned about a few years ago when I got interested in the Pacific Garbage Patch. I had a group of ocean plastic activists that contacted me and said, could you do some artworks around ocean plastic pollution as a way of putting the message out there that we have a problem with plastic in our oceans. And so I went to a meeting of a bunch of scientists who were all who had all gathered to talk about the plastic, the Pacific Garbage Patch, this newly named, newly discovered phenomenon that at the time was an estimated 10 million tons of floating plastic garbage in the Pacific Ocean. And my intention at the time was to bum a ride on somebody's research vessel and go to the middle of the Pacific Garbage Patch, which I had heard, you guys have maybe also heard, that it's a floating island of garbage twice the size of Texas in the Pacific Ocean. So I was thinking, I'm a guy who takes photographs of giant piles of garbage. That's what I do. And so I was thinking that I would get on somebody's research vessel and go to the middle of this massive floating raft of plastic garbage and take a horizon-to-horizon panoramic image that would blow everybody's minds about the amount of plastic in the oceans. And what I learned at this meeting is there is no floating island of garbage in the middle of the Pacific Ocean. But there are at least 10 million tons of plastic garbage in the Pacific, but it's all spread out. Originally the ocean current scientists described this thing called the gyre, the Pacific gyre, which is a swirling current that sort of takes everything to the middle of the Pacific. And they originally thought, well, all the plastic is going to the middle and creating this thing. But actually what happens if you were to go dump a garbage can of plastic out in Puget Sound, it wouldn't all stay together, it would slowly spread out. Sort of like when you exhale smoke. After a year, the atoms or the molecules of smoke are all spread out over the whole face of the Earth. And it's the same thing with plastic in the oceans. It's all spread out. And most of it is underwater. Plastic bags are like 4 feet down, and plastic bottles float just below the surface. And it breaks down into smaller and smaller pieces all the time. And so the vast majority of all the plastic in our oceans is invisible. It's broken down into infinitesimally tiny particles, individual molecules of plastic. And so the Pacific Garbage Patch, like many of the frightening phenomena of our time, is invisible. There's no way to take a photograph of it. There's no way to behold it. And those are the issues that I'm most interested in, and I've been kind of focusing on for quite a few years now. It's the question of how do we connect with these mass phenomena of our time, whether it's the amount of carbon we're releasing into our atmosphere, or the destruction of our rainforests, or the overfishing of our fish populations, or the 925 million people in the world right now who are living under starvation and malnutrition conditions. Like, how do we connect with these mass phenomena that there's no way we can see them? There's no way to take a photograph of them. And the only information we have to try to relate to these issues and to feel something about them, to care enough to start to act collectively about them, the only information we have is these giant statistics. The numbers like 925 million people, or 10 million tons of plastic, or 210 billion plastic bottles were used in the United States last year. Like, these are numbers that are far beyond our ability to comprehend. And if we can't comprehend them, then we can't comprehend the issues themselves, and then we don't feel anything. And I think that's part of why we have this disconnect happening in our world right now, where the way I heard it described about 10 years ago, that was a great inspiration to me, is when Al Gore, before he released Inconvenient Truth, he was doing his slideshows, and he was on his slideshow here in Seattle, and he said, we all know what we need to be doing, but we just aren't finding the collective will to do it. And I got really interested in that, and I was thinking, like, what's the disconnect there? Why are we as a culture not living by our principles? Why aren't we doing what we know we should be doing to protect our world and the well-being of all of the beings who are going to be inheriting from us in the future? And I think part of it is because the issues that we need to be acting on are just these ideas, these incomprehensible ideas. And I think if we could stand in front of a pile of 10 million tons of plastic and know that that's all in the Pacific Ocean, it would be multiple stadiums filled with plastic. Or if we could stand in front of a pile of all the laptop computers that we discarded last year, or all of the cell phones, then it would be so shocking to us. You know, a pile of 210 billion plastic bottles would be larger than Mount Everest. If we could really feel that, we could really see it, we could behold the enormity of what we're all contributing to. Then it would be so shocking to us that we would feel something profound. And collectively, if we could do that, then that would give rise to a kind of collective feeling of those, you know, our collective anger, our collective grief, our collective rage, and our fear for the future. Like, those are the feelings that turn into the rocket fuel to drive change. And if we aren't having those feelings because we just can't connect with the issues because they're invisible and incomprehensible to us, then that to me is a partial explanation for why this disconnect is happening. That's what I'm trying to reconnect with my work. And so I learned about this phenomenon on Midway Island. I was lamenting at this group at this meeting of this group of scientists. Like, I'm a photographer, I want to take a photograph of the Pacific garbage patch. And I was lamenting, it's another one of those invisible issues. And this young woman turned to me and she said, well, if you want to see the Pacific garbage patch, go to Midway Island in the very middle of the Pacific Ocean and look inside the stomachs of dead baby albatrosses. I was like, oh my God, you gotta be kidding me. Midway Island, it's halfway between the United States and Asia. It's got 3,000 miles of ocean on both sides. And 2,600 or 2,700 miles to the north, you get up to the Aleutians. And then 4,500 miles to the south is Australia. The Pacific Ocean is 1/4 of the Earth's surface, and Midway is right in the middle. And at least by that measure, it's the most remote island on the planet. It's the furthest from a continent of anywhere in the world. And what you see when you on the island, on the ground, is absolutely stunning, and I want to show you that now.
Do we have the courage to face the realities of our time and allow ourselves to feel deeply enough that it transforms us and our future? Come with me on a journey through the eye of beauty, across an ocean of grief, and beyond.
So this is a project that's about witnessing. And when I first went there, it was in the spring of 2009, so 3 years ago. And all I saw was the dead birds filled with plastic. We didn't get to meet the live albatrosses because the live ones are all off the island at this time of year. And so I took all those photographs that you saw in there. And by the way, those are all straight documentary photographs. Not a single piece of plastic was moved or arranged or manipulated or added to any of those pictures. That's as we found them on the ground. And there are tens of thousands of them that look like that. And I came back with those photographs and I put them up on my website. And was astonished that they went viral on the internet and reached a far larger audience than any of my previous work. And it really broke my heart what the public response was, because what I want for my work to do is to help us feel. You know, I think that's the missing piece in our culture, in first world culture, especially in American culture maybe right now, is we've lost touch with what we feel about our world. And I want my work to reconnect us with that. I think feelings like anger and rage and fear, and especially grief, I think those feelings are all legitimate responses to what's happening in our world right now. And I was taught as a kid that those are bad feelings. You're supposed to, shove those feelings aside and get back to feeling fine. You know, if you're angry or if you're feeling sad, then something's wrong. And I've learned more recently, at least I've come to believe for myself, that those feelings are natural human responses to what's happening to our world. And I want to help bring those feelings into consciousness, into sort of collective awareness and collective conversation, because they're all there in all of us. It's just that if they're shoved down out of sight, then they manifest unconsciously in all kinds of bizarre ways. And so it really broke my heart that what happened when people saw my Midway work is they wrote and they told me they felt hopeless. They weren't inspired and empowered. They felt despair and trauma in seeing this kind of work. And there was one experience that I had in Australia. I went there to speak at a conference, and while I was there, I also spoke at a girls' school. It was a middle school, and there were 400 of these beautiful young girls all wearing their matching school outfits, and I showed them those photographs, and their teacher stood up at the end, and she said, when I see this work, I just feel panic. And her voice cracked, and she started crying. And it still just breaks my heart to remember that. Because what she said, Chris, would you please just tell me, how do we get to hope from here? And that, to me, is the big question. I mean, I think we went a long way toward hope a couple nights ago. But when you look at the issues of our times, whether it's the 64,000 tons of spent fuel rods that are sitting in our nuclear power plant, sitting around in the back of our nuclear power plants, waiting to melt down as soon as there's a power outage, or the destruction of our forests, or the extinction of so many species happening right now. But if you really look at those issues, it's overwhelming. And so I just decided to face that question: how do we get to hope from here? To head on. And the elders that I consulted with all told me to go back to Midway. They said, you've only seen one piece of the story. And they all said, we don't know what the rest of the story is, but there's a bigger story there. And so I went back to Midway and met the live birds, 1 million of these magnificent creatures. They're as big as eagles. And they have a 7 to 8 foot wingspan. And they live so closely packed on the island. You saw there that they're as thick on the ground as we are here in this room. And they've been living on Midway for 22 million years, and they've never had a predator. And so they have no fear of humans. You can literally walk right up to them and film them as they're feeding their babies, or as the babies are hatching from their eggs. And the experience of seeing this tragedy wrapped in this envelope of exquisite beauty was a transformational experience for me. And it was this experience of what I discovered, still seeing the dead babies on the ground and watching them die, watching the parents feed them plastic. It was this incredibly sad experience, but what happened for me is it was like a trap door that opened when I went all the way there. It was like this trap door that opened and just dropped me into this vast ocean of love that I didn't even know I had for the albatross. Because it never occurred to me in my life that I'd ever fall in love with a creature on a faraway island that I never even thought I would visit. And to discover that I love these birds, and that I'm just like, I feel so much reverence for their amazing story of how they fly thousands of miles out across the ocean, and the incredible tenderness that they have for each other. They mate for life, and the amazing tenderness they show to their babies that I'll show you in just a moment. It was this transformational experience for me that reconnected me not only with my love for the albatross, but with my love for the miracle of our world and for the gift of my own life. And that's the piece, I think, that we have, that's gone missing in our culture. A sort of sacred relationship with the gift of life and with the miracle of our world. And because there's nothing particularly more beautiful or more wonderful about the albatross than there is about any of the other creatures of our world, including all the humans. And so what I've come to think of this project as being about is not so much, I'm not so much interested in saving the albatross or even fixing the problem of plastic pollution in our oceans, because it's a problem like global climate change, that the only real solution to it is radical global change of consciousness that will lead to radical global change of behavior. That's how to fix all of these issues, I think. And the way to achieve radical global change of consciousness happens in here. It doesn't happen out there. All the problems out there, where there's the destruction of our forests, are all the people in the world who don't have food. Those of you who've ever studied hunger in the world know that it's not because there's not enough food. There's plenty of food. It's that we aren't getting it to them. And the destruction of our rainforests or the extinction of species, to me, these are all symptoms of something that's happening in here for each one of us, and then on a collective level. And if we can solve this, then solving those external symptoms out there, I think, would be fast and easy. If we can solve this on a collective level. And so that's what I'm interested in doing. And I've come to believe in the tremendous power of grief as a doorway back into a felt experience of love for our world. Because that's what grief is. Grief is a felt experience of love for something that we've lost or that we're losing. And it's such a powerful experience to feel grief, because we talk about love, it's a word that we all use every day, If you go to the Hallmark greeting cards, every single one will say something about love. But to actually feel it is not such an easy experience. Even with our lover, with our spouses, with our boyfriends and girlfriends, like we say we love them, but like to feel that, to actually feel it, is it can be somewhat elusive. And when we feel grief, that's a time when we truly feel how much we love whatever that thing is that we've lost or that we're losing. And I believe as a culture, if we could grieve, if we would allow ourselves to step out of our fear of sadness and feel our grief as a culture, begin a cultural process of grieving what is being lost, then I believe that would change everything. Because then we would all remember this deep piece of wisdom that we all carry, that we're all made of, and that is our profound love for our world and for the miracle of our own lives. And so that's sort of what I'm aiming my Midway project at. And I want to show you a couple more clips that are more about the envelope of beauty in which this tragedy is nested. Let's see. The first one I want to show you is it's a very, very short clip. It's just like 15 seconds or something. And it's a piece that shows the curiosity of the albatross. These birds they have no predators. And so not only are they not afraid of us, but they're actually curious about us. And to see them come toward us on the island, like you see them looking from like 100 feet away, and they're like, what's that thing over there? And they sort of do this motion with their head, and they start walking right toward us. And we're like fiddling with the cameras, like, hey, infinity, 20 feet, 10 feet, 5 feet, whoa! And their beaks come right up. And it's a reminder. I mean, I have a hypothesis lately that curiosity might actually be the deepest of all instincts, even deeper than feeling, deeper than love. It may be curiosity, but curiosity is a really fragile thing. It can get squashed just by the slightest bit of fear. And in our culture right now, if you think of just how much fear there is, how divided we are in 1,000 different ways, then here's a reminder of what curiosity looks like. Here's another one. This is what their mating dance looks like. And just a really quick intro to the mating dance. I got to hang out with this really cool guy recently who's an animal communication specialist. And he's studying animal communications. And he was telling me that animals experience the passage of time at a different speed, depending on the size of their brain. And so we have this really big brain. And so the fastest we can have a thought is something like 1/8 of a second, because it takes thousands of neural connections to all happen one after the other. So, the world champion ping pong player who has the fastest possible reflexes, the fastest they can possibly see the ball and swing is something like 1/8 of a second or a 16th of a second or something like that. But compared to us, a fly can think unbelievably fast. So when a fly is flying, it experiences its wings going like this. And so, and we experience the fly going. And so the fly on a table, we experience it like, pah! And the fly is like, here comes this gigantic hand. Well, probably should move sometime soon. So the albatross has a brain that's about the size of a walnut, and they experience the passage of time much more slowly than we do. So I'm working with that in the film, and so here's a clip that starts off at the speed we see it, and then shifts to the speed that they see it. Isn't it amazing? That thing they do where they put their head under their wing, the whole back of their body opens up, and all their feathers are sort of fluff out. And the biologists who study albatrosses think that what they're doing is they're showing to their mate how many feathers they have available for the long winter of sitting in an egg. So because Midway is a little bit north, it's not a tropical island, and it gets cold there in the winter, and these storms come blowing through, and it's really harsh. on the island. So they're saying, okay, this is how many feathers to keep our baby warm. At least that's the hypothesis. How are we doing for time?
Keep going.
Keep going? Okay. Let's see. Well, I want to show you one more clip. And this is a baby hatching from its egg. And we couldn't even believe when we started filming, we were there in February. There's a 2-week period in February where 350,000 baby albatrosses all hatched from their eggs. And so we went there ready to film them, and we brought one of those big white lenses, a $40,000 lens that we rented, thinking we were going to have to be filming from way back, and we wanted to get extreme close-ups. And the lens never came out of the box because it was just astonishing to see how close they let us come. And we finally ended up, we had this super wide-angle lens, and you know how lenses go from like infinity to 5 feet or whatever, and then it stops. Well, they let us much closer than that. And so luckily one of the guys on our team had one of those old tiny screwdrivers to fix your eyeglasses, and we took out the little screw that stops it at 5 feet until we could focus the lens all the way up to a couple inches away, because that's how close the birds let us. It actually let us into their nest. In one of these scenes, you'll see the camera, I'm kneeling on the ground, sort of in like a prayer position, because the nests are all on the ground. I'm kneeling on the ground, and the camera is in the nest, and the mother is standing right there, and her breast is right here, her head is over the top of my head, and her wing is resting on my head as I was filming her baby hatching. So here's what that looks like. Think about the strange coincidence of the story that's happening out on Midway Island. I mean, of all the possible birds to be filled up with plastic, to be sending us this profoundly disturbing message about the state of our world and the state of our own spirits as well. I mean, standing over those birds is like looking in a mirror on so many different levels. But of all the possible birds to be sending us this message, you know, it could be the Pacific pigeon filled up with plastic, or the northern fulmar, or the Laysan duck, or it's the albatross. You know, this bird that already has this kind of mythical quality that's has this long history in our poetry and our literature of being a creature that brings us messages. It's a harbinger. And of all the places for this thing to be happening, on this island where either the first or second most decisive naval battle in the history of human civilization happened, the Battle of Midway in World War II, where the Japanese Navy made it as far as Midway on their way to attack the United States, and that's where they were stopped and turned around. And then from that point on, over the next few years, we slowly pushed them further and further back until we were within range of our B-29 bombers of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. It's like Midway has already been this incredible turning point in human history. And if all the things that island could be named, you know, it could be called Coconut Atoll, or, you know, Sand Island, or whatever, and it's called Midway. Like this incredibly evocative term for the place that humanity finds itself, as we find ourselves right now, kind of as the old paradigms collapse, and as all, you know, the curves are all going vertical right now, and the new paradigm is beginning to emerge, is beginning to form, and we're sort of going through the eye of the needle right now, and scientists all over the world are telling us that the next 10 years are the most important in the next 10,000 for the future well-being of our biosphere and for all the beings that are going to inhabit the Earth in the future. It's like, what more evocative term than Midway? It's just this strange coincidental sort of poetry that's happening out there that I believe has I'm sort of going all in on my belief that this island has the ability to heal our world in this really special way, which is to help us feel our grief. And I'm somewhat following the model of what happened in Germany after World War II. You know, millions of Germans realized and
and began to account for the fact and process the fact that it wasn't only Hitler who did the Holocaust. There was thousands and thousands and thousands of German people who were driving the trains and who were designing the gas chambers and all participating in one way or another in the Holocaust. And after World War II, instead of shoving that aside, as we in America have been shoving aside our grief and our shame and our, the atrocities that have been committed in our name ever since the beginning of our country, instead of shoving them aside, the German culture faced it through poetry and art. And they went through this long process, and I've talked with lots of German people about the cultural facing of shame and grief. And German people say, we're so sick of facing our shame and our grief that we're all tired of it. And it's just such a juxtaposition to American culture where we've never even stepped our toes into that water. And I believe if we could sort of overcome our fear of going down this hellhole of depression, that's why I think we're afraid to do it. And I know for my own self, this is why I was originally afraid of going to Midway. I was afraid I would come home just a sad person forever. That I would never be able to recover. Like if I fully faced even one of the horrors of our world, that I would be sad and depressed and filled with despair forever. And it's been such an astonishing experience that not only did that not happen, but that it dropped me into this completely unexpected place of love and a sort of new experience of wonderment for the miracle of our world. I believe culturally, if we could go there, if we could collectively grieve what's being lost, collectively allow ourselves to feel our own sadness and connect in community around the trauma that we're all holding for what's happening to our world, that it could be a transformational moment that could change everything. And so that's kind of where I'm aiming my work. And I think I'm done now, and please don't clap, though. I want to ask you not to applaud. If there's time, I think we're probably already over time, but I'm happy to stay a little longer and answer questions or whatever. If people need to take off their
So I noticed that you titled your films with YouTube. Are these available publicly to watch the
the film trailer is available publicly. Yeah, we have a website, midwayfilm.com, and it's also up on the trailer's up in a few different places. And the other clips are all not publicly released. But the whole film will be out, I think, in about a year. We're still doing the editing process. We have about a year to go. Yeah?
You said that the albatross leave the island. If they're so far from where do they go?
She asked if the albatross leave the island, if they're so far from everything, where do they go? Well, it's amazing. The albatross is a seabird, and they don't need land. And so, like when the babies, when the fledglings, which are the 6-month-old babies who are sort of like teenagers, the first time they leave the island, which is in July, August, they're big enough to fly, and their parents stop feeding them. And one day, all the fledglings that are strong enough to fly, they fly off and they leave the island, and they never touch land for 5 years. They live out at sea. And they have these amazing trifold wings. They have the same number of joints as we do, and to see them fold their wings is so cool. And when they open their wings, they have these joints that can lock. And they have this look like a pterodactyl when they fly because their wings are so huge and they lock, and they can actually stay aloft for weeks or months at a time without ever having to land. It takes them almost no energy to fly. And they almost never need to flap their wings because they're so good at zooming. Like they can zoom across the waves, and just the tiniest air current just bumps them up higher. And so you can watch one like from way off there, go all the way past and way down there without ever having flapped its wing one time. And so they live out at sea, and the only reason they come to Midway is to have their babies. But that's like a 9-month process of making the nest and then sitting in the egg and then feeding the baby for all those months. So it's actually this long, arduous process. But that's the only thing they ever do on land. is they find their mate, doing the mating dances, and then they hatch their babies. And they range out over the entire Pacific to, and that's how they end up filled with plastic, is they go looking for food to bring back and feed their babies. They feed their babies like all birds feed their babies, which is they go get food and they come back and feed by regurgitation. And so they range out over the Pacific, and they can fly 400 miles in a day. They just zoom and zoom and zoom and zoom, and they're looking for little pieces of floating squid. There might be one piece of floating squid every 100 miles of ocean. And so the albatross is seen like off the coast of Japan and Asia, and all the way up in the Aleutians, and all the way down off the coast of the Guadalupe Islands in Mexico. Like, they fly that far, and then they're able to navigate their way all the way back to Midway and find their baby. And unknowingly, they return to the island with some squid in their stomach and, a toothbrush or a bottle cap or a cigarette lighter or whatever, and all of that gets fed to the babies. And over time, the babies can digest what they can, and the stuff that they can't digest slowly fills their stomach up until, when they become a teenager, many of their stomachs are completely filled with plastic. And that, they feel full, probably, but, they're actually in advanced stages of dehydration and starvation, and their stomachs are punctured in many cases by the hypodermic syringes and by sharp pieces of plastic. And so that's how they die by the tens of thousands around this time of the year.
How did the project transition from photography to film and movie?
Well, it was a really challenging process to transition from photography to film, because I'd never made a film before, and it never even occurred to me before that I would ever make a film. So, I've never watched films with the camera angle in mind, and way, way behind the curve. But to go back out to the island and see not only the still life, the sort of surreal still life images of the dead birds on the ground that I could photograph the way I know to photograph, but to see 900,000 of these incredibly beautiful creatures all taking off and flying when the wind blows across the island. And to see them doing the mating dances and just the exquisiteness of their life cycle, and just the raucous amazingness of a million birds on this tiny, tiny island, it just called out for a film. And I was really surprised to discover that a feature film hasn't ever been made out there. And I don't really know why, other than the fact that it's hard to get to. The island is kind of inaccessible. And so I just decided, okay, well, I have to make a film. And I happened to be friends with Luis Hoyos, who's the director of The Cove. And I called Louis and I said, okay, give me first-time director 101. And he said, surround yourself with lots of people who know what they're doing. So I sent a little team of cinematographers who were friends of mine. And it's only 4 of us, 2 videographers and a sound guy. And everybody's experienced at doing all of those things. And so we go out there, and my job as director is to simply hold the space open for the story to tell itself to us. I realized early on I don't want to go out there with a shot list, and the narrative in mind, because I don't know what the narrative is. I only know that there's this incredibly beautiful, healing, like this acupuncture point for the world out there, with this story that wants to be told, is sort of telling itself to us. And so, my job is just to sort of hold the form. And with my little team of guys, my most typical direction is, we'll be out there and there'll be a baby hatching from its egg, or a scene of a mother feeding its chick. And I say, okay guys, imagine that the greatest film director in the world is here, and he's riding your ass hard. What would that person say to do? Whatever that is, do it. And it's really cool, because they're like, okay, they would say, think outside the box. Honor the subject. How do you honor the subject? Get down below it. Okay, quickly dig a hole, bury the camera in the ground so we can look up at the baby. And And I'm just like, okay, I'll be over in the golf cart having a cup of coffee. Let me know if you need anything. Yeah.
So how do you not come back from culture? Is it the sheer beauty and miracles that you see? Because I was thinking the same thing, like I feel like I would be so scarred from it. And so it's good to bring silver. That's not the case.
Yeah, she asked, how do I not come back traumatized from the experience and scarred from witnessing it there? And I mean, what I'm coming to learn about sort of connecting with the horrors of our world is that it is traumatizing. And I am traumatized by what I see out there. And my theory is that we're all traumatized by what's happening in our world. And what I'm just slowly learning to hold is my pain and my grief and my despair and my sadness for what's happening to our world, and my joy and love for the miracle, because it's still a miracle. You know, with all of the bad stuff that's happening in our world, it's still a miracle. And I just had an amazing experience of going to a 10-day meditation retreat at a place in the Santa Cruz Mountains down in California. And it's right in the middle of this incredibly beautiful grove of redwoods. And the whole point of the retreat was to experience our sadness for what's happening to the world. And it was days and days of processing around that. And a lot of crying, a lot of like really feeling the horror of it. And we'd walk out and just be in this mystical forest with the moon overhead. And like to hold those together, like that to me that's the skill I'm trying to learn for myself, is not to think that feeling despair and grief and hopelessness about our world is the only thing. It's like I do feel hopeless and I feel hopeful. Like I really believe in the word and I think to be whole, you know, that's what I think it means to be whole. It's like we don't ever get over our grief. We don't ever fully heal it. It's like I think we're all scarred. I'm deeply scarred from childhood emotional trauma and from people, loved ones that I've lost and horrible things that have happened to me. And we're all like that. I'm not different. We've all had deeply traumatic experiences in our life. We all are scarred, and we're all also unscarred spiritual beings. Like we can be both of those things. We can be all of those things. And I think as a culture, if we could sort of collectively get that if we allow ourselves to feel our grief for what's happening, that doesn't mean that we don't get to laugh anymore. You know, we don't get to crack dumb jokes. You know, we don't get to feel joy. We can still do that. And to be whole, we can also embrace the part of ourselves that feels so frightened about our future, and feels so sad about what's being lost, and so angry about what's being done to us by forces that we can't control. And the way I experience it, and this is the really astonishing part, is my own sort of mental, emotional, spiritual state. It's like a spring-loaded continuum that opens and closes in both directions. And imagine over here is grief and sadness. And over here is love and joy. And I always want to go there. Like, I want to live over here. But every time I try to go there, it's like, when am I ever going to get there? It's like I can't seem to get there. And, you know, it's like, when am I going to finally be happy? Like, what do I... And what I discovered is, if I go there, if I just... And this is what this Midway project has been for me, is I just decided, I'm going to go all the way there and just see what happens. And I've discovered if I go all the way into grief, if I really allow myself to feel my sadness for the world, that part of the continuum opens up further and further and further, and the other part simultaneously opens. And so in my own life, I've never felt more joyful and peaceful and filled with love than in my life before, as a result of the work that I'm doing around grief. And it's really counterintuitive. And I have a sense that culturally, we're afraid that if we go there, we're just going to get stuck there. And that to me is the piece that's the most powerful piece of the story that Midway is offering to us, is that grief is it's not its own sort of abyss, sort of hellhole of sadness. It's a portal. It's a doorway into remembering what we've all forgotten. It's a doorway back into our collective joy that's gone missing.
In a practical sense, how has your consumption changed? Like, are you afraid to use certain pens now, or do you avoid tubs of takeout containers? Or, like, after hearing about the speed jar, I started looking around and I was like, I use about 1,000 plastic bottles every day, and I don't know how to drink them. Can you change the ways that you live? So,
Everybody hear the question? Yeah. Well, it's after going out to Midway, I became a lot more aware than I ever have before about my own plastic consumption. And I've learned all these ways to deplastify my life. And one of the things I began to learn is how dangerous plastic is to our own bodies, independently of its effect on life in the oceans. I've learned about the harmful effects of bisphenol A and phthalates and the new bisphenol A. The new bisphenol A-free plastic that we're all buying in bottles and go, oh yeah, bisphenol A-free, cool. Well, the new bisphenol A is bisphenol S, which is this incredibly long tetraethyl 2,3-chlor gigantic molecule. And instead of the A at the very end, now it's S, and it's just as toxic as bisphenol A. And it's the giant plastic manufacturers' very clever way of providing themselves another 15 to 20 years until we all discover what the scientists already know, which is bisphenol S is just as toxic as bisphenol A. So stay away from bisphenol A-free plastic; it's just as bad. Learning about the toxic effects on our own bodies, that was the most motivating thing of all for me. And to start to discover that shampoo, like all of those commercial shampoos, bisphenol A is actually an ingredient in the shampoo. We're massaging bisphenol A directly into our scalp when we use those shampoos. And to discover that our plastic, or even the cardboard containers that hold stuff like organic almond milk are lined with an epoxy resin that contains bisphenol A. And so in our family, we've been trying to deplastify our life as much as possible. And there's all kinds of interesting ways. Once you really start paying attention, there's not a lot of plastic left in our household. But, at the same time, I'm always, I'm reluctant to go into the conversation about all the cool things I do as someone who cares about the environment, because in 2 days I'm flying to Michigan to give a talk at the University of Michigan. And last year I flew something like 200,000 miles giving talks all over the country and around the world. And I'm always acutely aware, and I want to always remind myself that every gesture that I can make, like changing my light bulbs and pumping up my car tires to their full pressure so they get, all of those things, none of them are nearly enough. And I feel this kind of, I bring canvas bags to the supermarket with me, so I'm an environmentalist. It's like I feel the danger of that. And so, on the one hand, every little gesture we can make is good, and those can even be a portal into, just deciding you're not going to drink water out of plastic bottles anymore. It's sort of a doorway into a new kind of consciousness, and it has a cascading effect. And we need to do so much more than simply making individual gestures. And I think the way to do so much more is to begin this shift in here, and then I think we're all making it already. It's not like we're starting from scratch, but to just get more deeply into a conversation with hundreds of millions of people about how can we actually bring our lifestyles into a sustainable balance with our biosphere. Yeah.
Doesn't that segue right into politics? In politics, where I've experienced a lot of my time. I'm glad we're having this today, on Monday, but still, the forces at work there. And if you try to get involved, as I've done on the Democrats, you realize completely how screwed nothing, seems to me that nothing that comes from our heart can counteract that. Because it's just, it's the worst thing about human beings at work in that realm. And yet it has control over everything we're talking about.
Yeah. Yeah, it's hard. I mean, inside of each one of our hearts is the same battle that we see sort of playing out on the grand and global stage. It's like the battle between fear. Fear is what leads. Fear is the source of greed and selfishness and love. You know, our compassion for the world and our desire to be connected with each other and you know, to see it playing out unconsciously in this incredible theater. I mean, it's just been bizarre. And to see just how I mean, I read an article a couple of days ago that said that on the morning after election night, this beast, you know, this dark, incredibly dark force that has been rising up in our society for such a long time is now limping away mortally wounded. It's like, yes! And still, our political system it's extremely badly broken. And I mean, the way that I look at it is one of the reasons that it's extremely badly broken is because in our country, the 300 million people that live within it we're all asleep. You know, we're disconnected from what we feel, and on different levels. You know, some people are living sort of in more disconnection than others, but as a collective, we're disconnected from what we feel. And if 300 million people could have that shift in consciousness, then 300 million people would be in a position to elect leaders that would make Obama look like far right. And not to say that, you know, I want to embrace old forms of communism or something like that. It's just that we could go so much further if we collectively could get in touch with what we feel and sort of return, like on a culture-wide level, to a sacred relationship with our own lives and with the world. And my belief is we don't even know what that would look like. I just want to, let's get there and then see what happens, because I have a suspicion that everything could change really, really fast if we could all get there. Well, I think that's all of our time. I do want to ask you not to applaud. I mean, this might be annoying, but I always experience applause as being sort of letting go and giving back. And if I've been able to give you something, I've tried to give you something, and if I have, then hold on to it. and we'll just go on to whatever's next. Thank you all for coming. Cheers. Terrific.